They brought him in at 2:17 a.m., an ambulance slicing through rain-slicked streets, lights flashing, siren cutting through the quiet Texas night. His name was James Dawson, 58 years old, a retired mechanic from Amarillo, Texas. He wore scuffed cowboy boots to the ER, a faded Dallas Cowboys cap, and he hadn't spoken a single word of German in his entire life, or so he thought. He'd suffered a grand mal seizure at home. His wife Marlene said he'd been complaining of headaches for weeks, but real men don't go to doctors, he told her, waving it off like a pesky fly. She finally called 911 when he collapsed in the garage, wrench still in hand, oil stains on his jeans. We stabilized him in Bay 3, gave him lorazepam to stop the postictal shaking, ran a stat CT scan. No bleed, no tumor, no obvious structural cause, just an angry-looking brain after an electrical storm. He woke up about an hour later, groggy, disoriented, but alert. Nurse Alvarez handed him a paper cup of water. He took it, looked her in the eye, and said clearly and calmly, "Könnten Sie mir bitte ein Glas Wasser geben?" The room went silent. None of us spoke German, but we recognized it instantly. The melody, the cadence, the unmistakable guttural flow. Nurse Alvarez leaned over and whispered, "He just asked for water, in German." James blinked, confused. What did I say? We played back the voice recorder we keep running for medico-legal documentation. When he heard his own voice speaking fluent German, his face went pale. "I don't know German," he insisted, voice rising. "Never been to Germany, barely passed Spanish in high school. Hell, I don't even like sauerkraut." But over the next few hours, it kept happening. He'd answer questions in perfect conversational German, using phrases like Mensch and Ach du lieber. He even corrected a med student's pronunciation of Dusseldorf. His wife, Marlene, started crying in the corner. "Is he possessed?" she whispered. "Is this the devil talking?" We called neurology. Dr. Chen came down in her scrubs, bleary-eyed but sharp. She ordered an MRI with contrast, an EEG, and a full language panel. And that's when we found it. A small cavernoma, a tangle of abnormal blood vessels, nestled deep in his left temporal lobe. It had bled during the seizure, pressing directly on Wernicke's area, the part of the brain that processes language comprehension. But here's the part that still haunts me. His brain didn't just malfunction. It rewired itself. Decades earlier, at age 19, James had spent 6 months working on a U.S. Army base in Stuttgart, West Germany. He claimed he never learned the language, just pointed at things and said Danke with a Texan drawl. Yet his brain had stored fragments, intonations, grammar structures, even regional slang. When the seizure disrupted his native English pathways, those dormant circuits activated, like a backup generator kicking on in a blackout. This is known in neurology as paradoxical functional facilitation, when brain damage unlocks hidden abilities. It's rare, unpredictable, and deeply unsettling. For 3 days, James switched between English and German mid-sentence. "I need to, wo ist die Toilette? Bathroom?" Marlene would stare at him, tears in her eyes. "It's like talking to a stranger," she said. "My Jimmy wouldn't say those things." We brought in Dr. Vogel, a German-speaking neurologist from the university. She sat with him for 45 minutes, speaking only German. Later, she told us, his fluency is native level. He used Swabian dialect expressions, things you only pick up living there. He's not faking. This is real. On day 4, the English started returning stronger. The German began to fade, like a radio signal losing strength, crackling into static. By day 6, he was back to asking for sweet tea, complaining about hospital coffee, and calling the nurses y'all. But before discharge, he pulled me aside in the hallway. His eyes were serious, almost haunted. "You ever believe in past lives?" he asked. I smiled gently. "I'm a doctor, James. I believe in brain scans and blood tests." He nodded slowly. Then he said something I'll never forget. "Then explain why, when I spoke German, I remembered a little girl in Stuttgart calling me Papa." He'd never been married before Marlene, never had children. I had no answer. The cavernoma was removed surgically 2 weeks later. Clean margins, no complications. James recovered fully. No more seizures, no more German. He went back to Amarillo, back to his garage, back to fixing F-150s and telling tall tales at the diner. But I still think about him. Because medicine doesn't have answers for everything. Sometimes the body holds stories we can't explain. Memories buried so deep in the neural wilderness, they only surface when the mind cracks open like dry earth in a storm. And in those moments, we're not just healers, we're witnesses to the strange, beautiful mystery of being human. I've been an ER doctor for 14 years. I've seen people come back from flatlines. I've held newborns who shouldn't have survived. I've watched patients walk again after being told they never would. But James Dawson, he showed me that the brain is not just a machine. It's an archive. A library of every place we've been, every voice we've heard, every life we've brushed against, even if we don't remember them. Sometimes trauma doesn't just break us, it reveals us. After he left, I looked up his old Army records, with his permission. Turns out he wasn't just working on engines in Stuttgart. He'd been stationed near a small village, where he helped rebuild homes after a flood. He'd spent evenings with the local family, shared meals, played with their daughter. Her name was Liesel. She was 5. He never mentioned her, not once. But his brain remembered. And for 3 days, it let her speak through him. Maybe that's not possession. Maybe that's not past lives. Maybe it's just love. So deep, so quiet. It survives even when memory fails. I don't know. But I do know this. The next time a patient says something that makes no sense, I won't dismiss it as confusion. I'll listen. Because sometimes the most impossible stories are the truest ones. And in the ER, truth doesn't always wear a lab coat. Sometimes it wears cowboy boots and speaks German. This is ER Confessionals. Stay safe and stay curious. Because you never know what memory is waiting in the silence, ready to speak when the world finally stops to listen. They say the brain is the final frontier. And maybe they're right. We map it with MRIs. We stimulate it with electrodes. We decode its signals with AI. But we still can't explain how a man from Texas can suddenly hold an entire childhood conversation in a language he never learned. We can't explain why, in his final German sentence before the English returned, he whispered, "Es tut mir leid, Liesel. Ich habe dich nicht beschützt." I'm sorry, Liesel. I didn't protect you. Doctor. Chen later told me that during the flood, the little girl had drowned. James had tried to save her, failed, buried it so deep he forgot he was there. But his brain didn't. It held her name, her voice, her last words to him. Papa, hilf mir. And decades later, when the seizure tore open that vault, she finally got to say goodbye. Medicine can fix broken bones. It can restart hearts. It can even quiet seizures. But it can't heal every wound. Some scars live in the language we never knew we spoke. And some goodbyes take a lifetime to find their voice. I keep a small journal now, not for diagnoses, not for treatments, for the stories that don't fit in charts. James is on page 1, and I'll keep writing, as long as the ER keeps teaching me that healing isn't always about fixing what's broken. Sometimes it's about honoring what's hidden, even if it speaks a language you don't understand. Because in the end, we're all more than our symptoms. We're all more than our diagnoses. We're archives of love, loss, and moments we thought we'd forgotten. And sometimes, the most miraculous recovery isn't walking again. It's remembering who you were and who you loved when no one else was listening. James sent me a postcard last Christmas from Amarillo. It just said, "Sweet tea's better than ever. Still hate sauerkraut. J." I smiled, but I keep wondering, did he dream in German that night? And if he did Liesel finally let go? I'll never know. But I hope so. Because every patient carries a world inside them. And our job isn't just to treat the body, it's to witness the soul, even when it speaks in a language we don't understand. This is why I stay in the ER. Not for the adrenaline, not for the saves, but for the moments when science ends and humanity begins. When a cowboy from Texas becomes a father in Stuttgart, just for 3 days. And in that space between languages, between lives, between loss and love, we find the truth that no scan can show. That we are never really gone, as long as someone remembers us. Even if they remember us in a language they never learned. So the next time you hear a story that sounds impossible, don't dismiss it. Listen, because behind every symptom is a story waiting to be heard. And behind every story is a person who just wants to be understood. This is ER Confessionals. Thank you for listening. Stay safe, stay kind, and never stop wondering what's hidden in the silence. Because you never know when it might speak and change everything. I still check the neurology journals. I read about new cases of foreign language emergence, but none hit me like James. Maybe because it wasn't just about the brain. It was about grief, about guilt, about a promise made in a flood and kept for 40 years in the quietest corners of a man's mind. We talk about patient histories like timelines, birth, illness, treatment, outcome. But real history isn't linear. It's layered, like an old house with rooms you forgot you built. And sometimes, when the walls crack, the past walks right through. I don't believe in ghosts, but I do believe in echoes. And James, he was an echo of a love that refused to drown. So if you're watching this and you've lost someone, know this. They're not gone. They're just waiting for the right moment to speak through you. And when they do, don't be afraid. Listen. Because that's how love stays alive, even after the heart stops, even after the words are forgotten, even after the world moves on. Some bonds don't need language. They just need a listener. And in the ER, we're learning to listen. Not just with our ears, but with our hearts. This is ER Confessionals. You matter. Your story matters. And if you've ever felt like no one understands you, remember James. The cowboy who spoke German, the mechanic who carried a little girl's voice for 40 years, and the doctor who finally learned that sometimes the most healing thing you can say is nothing at all. Just sit and listen.